from here and online. We're reading from Krishna book, chapter 75, why Duryodhana felt insulted at the end of Rajasuya sacrifice. So now before starting, offer our spiritual obeisances to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Nitinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravane Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. And to us others, Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvya Evacha Paritanam Pavadebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Alright. So, Chapter 75, why Duryodhana felt insulted at the end of Rajasuya sacrifice. King Yudhishthira was known as Ajata Shatru, or a person who has no enemy. Therefore, when all the men, demigods, kings, sages and saints saw the successful termination of the Rajasuya Yajna performed by King Yudhishthira, they were very happy. That Duryodhana alone was unhappy was astonishing to Maharaj Parikshit, and therefore he requested Shukadeva Goswami to explain this. Shukadeva Goswami said, "My dear King Parikshit, your grandfather, King Yudhishthira, was a great soul. His congenial disposition attracted everyone to be his friend, and therefore he was known as Ajatashatru, one who never created an enemy. He engaged all the members of Kuru dynasty in taking charge of different departments for the management of Rajasuya sacrifice. For example, Bhimasena was put in charge of the kitchen department, Duryodhana was in charge of the treasury department, Sahadeva in charge of the reception, Nakula in charge of supplies department, and Arjuna in charge of looking after the comforts of elderly persons. The most astonishing feature was that Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, took charge of washing the feet of all the incoming guests. The queen, the goddess of fortune, Draupadi, was in charge of administering the distribution of food. And because Krsna was famous for giving charity, he was put in charge of the charity department. In this way, Satyaki, Vikarna, Hardikya, Vidura, Santardhana, and Bhurishrava, the son of Bahalika, were all engaged in different departments for managing the affairs of the Rajasuya sacrifice. They were also bound in loving affection for King Yudhishthira that they simply wanted to please him.
After Shishupal died by the mercy of Lord Krishna and merged into the spiritual existence, and after the end of the Rajasuya Yajna, when all the friends, guests and well-wishers had been sufficiently honored and rewarded, King Yudhishthira went to bath in the Ganges. The city of Hastinapur stands today on the bank of Yamuna, and the statement of Srimad Bhagavatam that King Yudhishthira went to bath in the Ganges indicates, therefore, that during the time of the Pandavas, the river Yamuna was also known as the Ganges. While the king was taking on the Abhavrita bath, different musical instruments vibrated such as mridangas, kansels, panaba, drums, kettle drums and bagels, and the ankles bells of the dancing gods jingled. Many groups of professional singers sang as beenas, flutes, gongs and cymbals were played, and thus a tremulous sound vibrated in the sky. The princely guests from many kingdoms like Srijanya, Kamboja, Kuru, Kekaya and Koshal were present with their different flags and gorgeously decorated elephants, chariots, horses and soldiers. All of them passed in a procession with King Yudhishthira in forefront. The executive members who had performed the sacrifice, the priests, religious ministers and Brahmanas all loudly chanted the Vedic hymns. The demigods and the inhabitants of Pitraloka and Gandharva Loka, as well as many sages, showered flowers from the sky. The men and women of Hastinapur are Indraprastha, their bodies smeared with scents and floral oils, were nicely dressed in colorful garments and decorated with garlands, jewels, and ornaments, enjoying the ceremony. They threw on one another liquid substances like water, oil, milk, butter, and yogurt. Some even smeared these on each other's bodies. In this way, they enjoyed the occasion. The professional prostitutes jubilantly smeared this liquid substance of the bodies of the men, and the men reciprocated in the same way. All the liquid substances had been mixed with turmeric and saffron, and their color was a lustrous yellow.
In order to observe the great ceremony, many wives of the demigod had come in different airplanes, and they were visible in the sky. Similarly, the queens of the royal family, gorgeously decorated and surrounded by bodyguard, arrived on a different palanquin. During this time, Lord Krishna, the material cousin of the Pandavas, and his special friend Arjuna were both throwing the liquid substance on the bodies of the queens. The queens became blushful, but at the same time, their beautiful smiling brightened their face because of liquid thrown on their bodies. The saris covering them became completely wet. The different parts of their beautiful bodies, particularly their breast and their waist, became particularly visible because of the wet cloth. The queen brought buckets of the same liquid substance and with sprinkled them on the bodies of the brother-in-laws as they engaged in their such jubilant activities. Their hairs fell loose and the flowers decorating their bodies began to fall. When Lord Krishna, Arjuna and the queens were thus engaged in thus jubilant activities, persons who were not clean in the heart were agitated by the lusty desire. In other words, such behavior between pure males and females is enjoyable, but it makes persons who are materially contaminated become lustful.
From here, bro.
Yeah, King Yudhishthira.
Till?
King Yudhishthira.
Till where should? Till here?
Yeah.
Okay, 2 paragraphs. King Yudhishthira, in a gorgeous chariot yoked to excellent horses, was present there along with his queens, including Draupadi, and their features were so beautiful that it appeared as if the great Rajasuya sacrifice were standing there in person along with the different functions of the sacrifice. Following the Rajasuya sacrifice, there was the Vedic ritualistic study known as Patni Samyaja. This sacrifice, which one performs along with one's wife, was also duly conducted by the priests of King Yudhishthira. As Queen Draupadi and King Yudhishthira were taking their Avabrita bath, the citizens of Hastinapura, as well as the demigods, began to beat on drums and blow trumpets out of feelings of happiness, and there was a shower of flowers from the sky. When the king and the queen finished their bath in the Ganges, all the other citizens, consisting of all the varnas or castes, the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras, took their baths in the Ganges. Bathing in the Ganges is recommended in the Vedic literature because by such bathing, one is freed from all sinful reactions. This is still current in India, especially at particularly auspicious moments. At such times, millions of people bathe in the Ganges.
After taking his bath, King Yudhishthira dressed in a new silken cloth and wrapper and decorated himself with valuable jewelry. The king not only dressed himself and decorated himself, but also gave clothing and ornaments to all the priests and others who who had participated in the yajnas. In this way, he worshipped them all. He constantly worshipped his friends, his family members, his relatives, his well-wishers, and everyone present. And because he was a Vaishnava, a great devotee of Lord Narayana, he knew how to treat everyone well. The Mayavadi philosophers' endeavor to see everyone as God is an artificial attempt at oneness, but a Vaishnava or a devotee of Lord Narayana sees every living entity as part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, a Vaishnava's treatment of other living entities is on the absolute platform, as one cannot treat one part of his body differently from another part because they all belong to the same body. A Vaishnava does not see a human being as distinct from an animal because in both he sees the soul and the super soul seated together.
When everyone was refreshed after bathing and was dressed in silken clothing, with jeweled earrings, flower garlands, turbans, long wrappers, and pearl necklaces, they looked altogether like demigods of heaven. This was especially true of the women, who were very nicely dressed. Each wore a golden belt around the waist. They were all smiling, with spots of tilaka and curling hair scattered here and there. This combination was very attractive. Those persons who had participated in the Rajasuya sacrifice, including the most cultured priests, the Brahmanas who had assisted, the citizens of the old Varnas, and the kings, demigods, sages, saints, and citizens of Pitriloka, were all very much satisfied by the dealings of King Yudhishthira, and at the end they happily departed for their residences. While returning to their homes, they talked of the dealings of King Yudhishthira, and even after a continuous talk of his greatness, they were not sated, just as one may drink nectar over and over again, and never be satisfied. After the departure of all the others, Maharaj Yudhishthira restrained the inner circle of his friends, including Lord Krishna, not allowing them to leave. Lord Krishna could not refuse the request of the king. Krishna therefore sent back all the heroes of Yadu dynasty, Sahamba and others. All of them returned to Dwarka, and Lord Krishna personally remained to give pleasure to the king.
In the material world, everyone has a particular type of desire to be fulfilled, but one is never able to fulfill his desires to his full satisfaction. But King Yudhishthira, because of his unflinching devotion to Krishna, could fulfill all his desires successfully by the performance of the Rajasuya sacrifice. From the description of the Rajasuya Yajna, such a function appears to be a great occasion of opulent desires. Such an ocean is not possible for an ordinary man to crush. Nevertheless, by the grace of Lord Krishna, King Yudhishthira was able to cross it very easily, and thus he became freed from all anxieties. When Duryodhana saw that Maharaj Yudhishthira had become very famous after performing the Rajasuya Yajna and was fully satisfied in every aspect, he began to burn with the fire of envy because his mind was always poisonous. For one thing, he envied the imperial palace constructed by the demon Maya for the Pandavas. The palace was excellent in its puzzling artistic workmanship and was befitting the position of great princes, kings or leaders of the demons. In that great palace, the Pandavas lived with their family members, and Queen Draupadi served her husbands very peacefully. And because in those days Lord Krishna was also there, the palace was also decorated by his thousands of queens. When the queens with their heavy breasts and the thin waist moved within the palace, and their ankle bells rang very melodiously with their movement, the whole palace appeared more opulent than the heavenly kingdom. because a portion of their breast was sprinkled with saffron powder. The pearl necklace on their breasts appeared reddish, with their beautiful earrings and flowing hair. The queens appeared very attractive after seeing such beauty in the palace of the king Yudhishthir. Duryodhana was envious. He was especially envious and lustful upon seeing the beauty of Draupadi because he had cherished a special attraction for her from the very beginning of her marriage with the Pandavas. In the marriage selection assembly of Draupadi, Duryodhana had also been present, and along with other princes, he had been very much captivated by the beauty of Draupadi, but he had failed to achieve her.
Once upon a time, King Yudhishthira was sitting on his golden throne in the palace constructed by the demon Maya. His four brothers and the other relatives, as well as his great well-wisher Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, were present. And the material opulences of King Yudhishthira seemed to less than that of the Lord Brahma. When he was sitting on the throne, surrounded by his friends, and the recitic were offering prayers to him in the form of nice song, Duryodhana came to the palace with his younger brother. Duryodhana was decorated with a helmet and he carried a sword in his hand. He was always in envious and angry mood, and therefore on the slight provisions he spoke sharply with the doorkeepers and became angry. By the craftsmanship of the demon Maya, the palace was so decorated in different places that one who did not know the right tricks would consider water to be the land and the land to be the water. Duryodhana was illusioned by his craftsmanship, and when crossing water thinking it to be the land, he fell in. When Duryodhana, out of his foolishness, had thus fallen, the queens enjoyed the incident by laughing. King Yudhishthira could understand the feeling of Duryodhana, and he tried to restrain the queen. But Lord Krishna indicated that King Yudhishthira should not restrain them from the enjoying the incident. Krishna desired that Duryodhana be fooled in that way, and that all of them enjoy his foolish behavior. When everyone laughed, Duryodhana felt insulted, and his bodily hair stood up in anger. Being thus insulted, he immediately left the palace. Bowing his head, he was silent and did not protest. When Duryodhana left in such an angry mood, everyone regretted the incident. The king Yudhishthira also was very sorry, but despite all this occurrence, Krishna was silent. He did not say anything against or in favor of the incident. It appeared that Duryodhana had been put into illusion by the supreme will of the Lord Krishna, and this was the beginning of the enmity between the two sets of the Kauru dynasty. This appeared to be the part of the Krishna's plan in his mission to decrease the burden of the world. King Parikshit had inquired from Sukdev Goswami why Duryodhana was not satisfied after termination of the great Rajsurya sacrifice, and thus it was explained by Sukdev Goswami. Thus end the Bhakti-Vedanta purport of 75th chapter of Krishna, why Duryodhana felt insulted at the end of Rajsurya sacrifice. The battle between Salva and the members of Yadu dynasty, chapter 76.
The battle between Salva and members of the Yadu dynasty. While Sukadeva Goswami was narrating various activities of Lord Krishna in playing the role of an ordinary human being, he also narrated the history of the battle between the dynasty of Yadu and a demon of the name Salva, who had managed to possess a wonderful airship named Saubha. King Salva was a great friend of Shishupala's. When Shishupala went to marry Rukmini, Salva was one of the members of the bridegroom's party. In the fight between the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty and the kings of the opposite side, Salva was defeated by the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty. But despite his defeat, he made a promise before all the kings that he would, in the future, rid the whole world of all the members of the Yadu dynasty. Since his defeat in the fight during the marriage of Rukmini, he had maintained within himself an unforgettable envy of Lord Krishna, and he was, in fact, a fool because he had promised to kill Krishna. Usually, such foolish demons take shelter of a demigod like Lord Shiva to execute their ulterior plans. And so, in order to get strength, Salva took refuge at the lotus feet of Lord Shiva. He underwent a severe type of austerity during which he would eat no more than a handful of ashes daily. Lord Shiva, the husband of Parvati, is generally very merciful, and he is quickly satisfied if someone undertakes severe austerities to please him. So, after continued austerities by Salva for 1 year, Lord Shiva became pleased with him and asked him to beg for the fulfillment of his desire.
Salva begged from the Lord Shiva the gift of an airplane, which would be so strong that it could not be destroyed by any demigod, demon, human being, Gandharva or Naga, or even by Rakshasa. Moreover, he desired that the airplane should be able to fly anywhere and everywhere he would like to pilot it, and be specifically very dangerous and fearful to the dynasty of the Yadus. Lord Shiva immediately agreed to give him the benediction, and Salva took the help of the demon Maya to manufacture this iron airplane, which was so strong and formidable that no one could crash it. It was a very big machine, almost like a big city, and it could fly so high and at such a great speed that it was almost impossible to see. So, there was no question of attacking it. It appeared to be almost covered with darkness, yet the pilot could fly it anywhere and everywhere. Having acquired such a wonderful airplane, Salva flew it to the city of Dwaraka because his main purpose in obtaining the airplane was to attack the city of the Yadus, toward whom he maintained a constant feeling of animosity.
Salva thus attacked the city of Dwarka from sky, and he was also surrounded by the city with a large number of infantry. The soldiers on the surface attacked the beautiful spots of the city. They began to destroy the nice parks, the city gates, the palaces, the skyscraper houses, the high walls around the city, and the beautiful spots where people would gather for recreation. While the soldiers attacked on the surface, the airplane began to drop big slabs of stone, tree trunks, thunderbolts, poisonous snake, and many other dangerous things. Salva also managed to create such a strong whirlwind within the city that all of Dwarka became dark because of the dust that covered the sky. The airplane, occupied by Salva, put the entire city of Dwarka into distress, equal to that caused on the earth long ago by the disturbing activities of Tripurasura. The inhabitants of Dwarka Puri became so much harassed that they were not peaceful for even a moment. The great heroes of Dwarka city, headed by commanders such as Pradyumna, counterattacked the soldiers and airplane of Salva. When he saw the extreme distress of the citizens, Pradyumna immediately arranged his soldiers and personally got up on a chariot, encouraging the citizens by assuring safety. Following his command, many warriors like Satyaki, Charudeshna, Samba, all the young brothers of Pradyumna, as well as Akrura, Kritavarma, Bhanu, Dvinda, Gada, Shuka, and Sharana, all came out of the city to fight with Salva. All of them were Maharathis, great warriors, able to fight with thousands of men. All were fully equipped with necessary weapons, assisted by hundreds and thousands of charioteers, elephants, horses, and infantry soldiers. Fierce fighting began between the two parties, exactly like formerly carried on between the demigods and the demons. The fighting was severe, and whoever observed the fierce nature of this fight felt his bodily hairs stand on end.
Pradimna immediately counteracted the mystic demonstration occasioned by the airplane of Salo. The king of Saubha, by the mystic power of the airplane, Salo had created a darkness as dense as night. But Pradimna all of a sudden appeared like the rising sun. As with the rising of the sun, the darkness of night is immediately dissipated. With the appearance of Pradimna, the power exhibited by Salo became null and void. Each of Pradimna's arrows had a golden feather at the end, and the shaft was fitted with a sharp iron head. By releasing 25 such arrows, Pradimna severely injured Salo's commander-in-chief. He then released another 100 arrows toward the body of Salo. After this, he pierced each and every shoulder by releasing one arrow. He killed the chariot drivers by firing 10 arrows at each one of them. And he killed the carriers like the horses and elephants by releasing 3 arrows directed toward each one. When everyone present on the battlefield saw this wonderful feat of Pradimna's, the great fighter on both sides praised his acts of chivalry. But still the airplane occupied by Salo was very mysterious. It was so extraordinary that sometimes many airplanes would appear to be in the sky, and sometimes there were apparently none. Sometimes the plane was visible and sometimes not visible, and the warriors of the Yadu dynasty were puzzled about the whereabouts of the peculiar airplane. Sometimes they would see the airplane on the ground, sometimes flying in the sky, sometimes resting on the peak of a hill, and sometimes floating on water. The wonderful airplane flew in the sky like a whirling firebrand. It was not steady even for a moment. But despite the mysterious maneuvering of the airplane, the commanders and soldiers of the Yadu dynasty would immediately rush toward Salo wherever he was present with his airplane and soldiers. The arrows released by the dynasty of the Yadus were as brilliant as the sun and dangerous as the tongues of serpents. All the soldiers fighting on behalf of Salo soon became distressed by the innocent release of arrow upon them by the heroes of the Yadu dynasty. And Salo himself became unconscious from the attack of these arrows.
Hare Krishna. The soldiers fighting on behalf of Salo were also very strong, and the release of their arrows also harassed the heroes of the Yadu dynasty. But still the Yadus were so strong and determined that they did not move from their strategic positions. The heroes of the Yadu dynasty were determined either to die on the battlefield or to gain victory. They were confident that if they died in the fighting, they would attain a heavenly planet, and if they came out victorious, they would enjoy the world. The name of Salo's commander-in-chief was Duman. He was very powerful, and although beaten by 25 of Pardumana's arrows, he suddenly attacked Pardumana with his first club and struck him so strongly that Pradyumna became unconscious. Immediately there was a roaring, "Now he is dead! Now he is dead!" The force of the club on Pradyumna's chest was very severe, and it appeared as though his chest had been torn asunder.
Pradyumna's chariot was being driven by the son of Daru. According to the Vedic military principle, the chariot driver and the hero of the charioteer must cooperate during the fighting. As such, because it was the duty of the charioteer driver to take care of the hero on the chariot during the dangerous and precipitous fighting. During Daru's sons removed Pradyumna from the battlefield. The 2 hours later, in the quiet place, Pradyumna regained consciousness, and when he saw that he was in the place other than the battlefield, he addressed the charioteer and condemned him. "Oh, you have done the most abnormal act. Why have you removed me from the battlefield? My dear charioteer, I have never heard that any of our family member was ever removed from the battlefield. Now, none of them left the battlefield while fighting. By this removal, you have overburdened me with a great defamation. It will be said that I left the battle while fighting was going on. My dear charioteer, I must assure you, you are the coward and inculcator. Tell me, how can I go before my uncle Balram and my father Krishna? What shall I say before them? Everyone will talk about me and say that I fell from the fighting place. And if they inquire from me about this, what will be my reply? My sister-in-law will play jokes upon me with scarcity words. My dear hero, how have you become such coward? How have you become an intruder? How have you become a low in the eyes of the fighters of the opposite you? I think, my dear charioteer, that you have committed a great offense by removing me from the battlefield. The charioteer of Pradyumna replied, My dear sir, I wish a long life for you. I think that I did nothing wrong, for it is the duty of a charioteer to help the fighter in the chariot when he is in the perilous condition. My dear sir, you are completely in the battle, but it is the duty of the charioteer and the warrior to protect each other in the perilous condition. I was completely aware of the regulative principle of fighting, and I did my duty. The enemies of the sudden struck you with his club so severely that you lost consciousness. You were in the dangerous position, surrounded by your enemies. Therefore, I was obliged to act as I did. Thus ends the Bhakti-Vedanta purport of 76th chapter, the battle between Salva and the members of the Yadu dynasty.
Chapter 77, the deliverance, the deliverance of Salva. After talking with his charioteer, the son of Daruka, Pradyumna, could understand the real circumstances. Therefore, he refreshed himself by washing his mouth and hands, and after arming himself properly with bows and arrows, he asked his charioteer to take him near the place where Salva's commander-in-chief was standing. During the short absence of Pradyumna from the battlefield, Dyuman, Salva's commander-in-chief, had been taking over the positions of the soldiers of the Yadu dynasty. Appearing on the battlefield, Pradyumna immediately stopped him and, smiling, shot 8 arrows at him. With 4 arrows, he killed Dyuman's 4 horses, and with 1 arrow, his chariot driver. With another arrow, he cut his bow in two. With another, he cut his flag to pieces. And with the last, he severed his head from his body. On the other fronts, heroes like Gada, Satyaki, and Samba were killing the soldiers of Salva. The soldiers staying with Salva in the airplane were also killed in the fighting, and they fell into the ocean. Each party began to strike the opposite party very severely in a fierce, dangerous battle that continued for 27 days without stopping.
4:30 to 5:30.
While the fight was going on in the city of Dwaraka, Krishna was staying at Indraprastha with the Pandavas and King Yudhishthira. This fighting with Salva took place after the Rajasuya Yajna had been performed by King Yudhishthira and after the killing of Sisupala. When Lord Krishna understood that there was a great danger in the city of Dwaraka, he took permission from the elder members of the Pandava family, especially from his aunt Gundi Devi, and started immediately for Dwaraka. Lord Krishna began to think that while he was staying in Hastinapura with Balarama after the killing of Sisupala's men must have attacked Dwaraka. On reaching Dwaraka, Lord Krishna saw that the whole city was greatly endangered. He placed Balaramji in a strategic position for the protection of the city, and he himself asked his charioteer Taruka to prepare to start. He said, "Taruka, please immediately take me to where Salva is staying. You may know that this Salva is very powerful, mysterious man. Don't fear him in the least." As soon as he got his orders from Lord Krishna, Taruka had him seated on the chariot and drove very quickly toward Salva.
The chariot of Lord Krishna was marked with a flag bearing the insignia of Garuda, and as soon as the soldiers and warriors of the Yadu dynasty saw the flag, they could understand that Lord Krishna was on the battlefield. By this time, almost all the soldiers of Salva had been killed. But when Salva saw that Krishna had come to the battlefield, he released a great, powerful weapon which flew through the sky with a roaring sound like a great meteor. It was so bright that the whole sky was lit up by its presence. But as soon as Lord Krishna appeared, he tore the great weapon into hundreds and thousands of pieces by releasing his own arrows. Lord Krishna struck Salva with 16 arrows, and with showers of arrows he overpowered the airplane, just as the sun is in a clear sky overpowers the whole sky by an unlimited number of molecules of sunshine. Salva struck a severe blow to Krishna's left side, where the Lord carried his bow Sharanga, and as a result, the Saranga bow fell from Lord Krishna's hand. This dropping of the bow was indeed wonderful. Great personalities and demigods who were observing the fighting between Salva and Krishna were most perturbed by this, and they exclaimed, "Alas, alas."
Salo thought that he had become victorious, and with a roaring sound addressed Lord Krishna as follows: "You rascal! Krishna, you kidnapped Rukmini forcibly. Even in our presence you had felled my friend Sisupal and married Rukmini yourself. And in the great assembly at King Yudhishthir's Rajasuya Yajna, while my friend Sisupal was little absent-minded, you took an opportunity to kill him. Everyone thinks that you are a great fighter and that no one can conquer you. So now you will have to prove your strength. I think that if you stand before me any longer with my sharp arrows, I shall send you to cut a place where reform from you will never return." To this Lord Krishna replied, "Foolish Salo, you are talking nonsensically. You do not know that the moment of death is already upon your head. Actually, heroes do not talk much. They prove their power by practical exhibition of chivalrous activities." After saying this, Lord Krishna, in great anger, struck Salo on the collar one with his club so severely that Salo began to vomit blood and trembles as if he were going to collapse from severe cold. Before Krishna was able to strike him again, however, Salo became invisible by his mystic power.
Where is it?
Within a few moments, a mysterious unknown man came before Lord Krishna. Crying loudly, he bowed down at the Lord's feet and said to him, "Since you are the most beloved son of your father, Vasudeva, your mother, Devaki, has sent me here to inform you of the unfortunate news that Shalva has arrested your father and taken him away by force, just as a butcher mercilessly takes away an animal." When Lord Krishna heard this unfortunate news from the unknown man, he at first became most perturbed, just like an ordinary human being. His face showed signs of grief, and he began to cry in a piteous tone. "How could that happen? My brother Lord Balarama is there, and it is impossible for anyone to conquer Balaramji. He is in charge of the Dwarka city, and I know he is always alert. How could Shalva possibly enter the city and arrest my father in that way? Whatever Shalva may be, his power is limited. So how could it be possible that he has conquered the strength of Balaramaji and taken away my father, arresting him as described by this man? Alas, destiny is, after all, very powerful."
While Shri Krishna was thinking like this, Saul brought before him his custody a man exactly resembling Vasudeva, his father. These were all creation of the mystic power of Salva. Salva addressed Krishna, "You rascal, Krishna, look, this is your father who has begotten you and by whose mercy you are still living. Now just see how I kill your father. If you have any strength, try to save him." The mystic juggler Salva, speaking in this way before Lord Krishna, immediately cut off the head of the false Vasudeva. Then without hesitation, he took away the dead body and got into his airplane. Lord Krishna is the self-sufficient, supreme personality of Godhead. Yet, because he was playing the role of a human being, he became very depressed for a moment, as if he had actually lost his father. But at the next moment, he could understand that the arrest and killing of his father were a demonstration of the mystic powers which Salva have learned from the demon Maya. Coming to his right consciousness, he could see that there was no messenger, no head of his father, but that Salva had left in his airplane, which was flying in the sky. He then began to think of slaying Salva.
Krishna's reaction is as controversial point among great authorities and saintly person. How could Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the receiver of all power and knowledge, be perverted in such a way. Lamentation, aggrievement, and bewilderment and characteristics of the conditioned soul. But how can such things affect the persons of the Supreme, who is full of knowledge, power, and all opulences? Actually, it is not at all possible that Lord Krishna was misled by mystic jugglery of Salva. He was displaying his pastime in playing the role of a human being. Great saintly persons and sages who are engaged in devotional service of the lotus feet of the Lord Krishna and who have thus achieved the greatest perfection of self-realization have transited to the bewilderment of the bodily concept of life. Lord Krishna is the ultimate goal of life. For such saintly person, how then could Krishna have been bewildered by the mystic jugglery of Salva? The conclusion is that Lord Krishna bewilderment was another opulences of his supreme personality. When Salva thought that Krishna had been bewildered by his mystic representation, he became encouraged and began to attack the Lord with great strength and energy by showering volumes of arrows upon him. But enthusiasm of Salva can be compared to the speedy march of months into a fire. Lord Krishna, by hurling his arrow with an unformidable strength, injured Salva, whose arrow, bow, and jeweled helmet was scattered in pieces. With a crashing blow from Krishna's club, Salva's wonderful aeroplane burst into the pieces and fell into the sea. Salva was very careful, and instead of crashing with the aeroplane, he managed to jump onto the land. He again rushed toward the Lord Krishna. When Salva ran swiftly to attack Krishna with his club, Lord Krishna cut off his hand, which fell to the ground with the club. Finally, deciding to kill him, the Lord took up his wonderful disc, which shone like a brilliant sun, and at the time of dissolution of the material creation, when Lord Sri Krishna stood up with the disc to kill Salva, he appeared just like a mountain with a red sun rising over it. Lord Krishna then cut off Salva's head, and the head with his earring and helmet fell to the ground. Salva was thus killed in the same way that Vitasur was killed by Indra, the king of heaven. When the Salva was killed, all his soldiers and followers cried, "Alas, alas!" When Salva's men were thus crying, the demigods from the heavenly planet showered flowers on Krishna and announced the victory by beating the drums and blowing the bugles. At that time, that very moment, other friends of Shishupal, such as Dandavakra, appeared on the scene to fight with Krishna and revenge the death of the Shishupal and others. When Dandavakra appeared before Lord Krishna, he was extremely angry. Thus ends the Bhakti-Vedanta purport of 77th chapter of Krishna, the deliverance of Salva. Finish. Continue करना है.
वो महाराज जी कंफ्यूजन हो गया.
78.
Chapter 78, the killing of Dantavakra, Viduratha, and Roma Harshana. After the demise of Shishupala, Salva, and Poundraka, a foolish demoniac king of the name Dantavakra wanted to kill Krishna to avenge the death of his friend Salva. He became so agitated that he appeared on the battlefield without the proper arms and ammunition and without even a chariot. His only weapon was his great anger, which was red hot. He carried only a club in his hand, but he was so powerful that when he moved, everyone felt the earth tremble. When Lord Krishna saw him approaching in a very heroic mood, he immediately got down from his chariot, for it was a rule of military etiquette that fighting should take place only between equals. Knowing that Dantavakra was alone and armed with only a club, Lord Krishna responded similarly and prepared himself by taking his club in his hand. When Krishna appeared before him, Dantavakra's heroic march was immediately stopped, just as the great furious waves of the ocean are stopped by the beach.
At the time, Dandavakra, who was the king of Karusa, stood firmly with his club and spoke to Lord Krishna as follows. It's a great pleasure and fortunate opportunity, Krishna, that we are seeing each other face to face. My dear Krishna, after all, you are my maternal cousin, and I should not kill you in this way. But unfortunately, you have committed a great mistake by killing my friend Salva. Moreover, you are not satisfied by killing my friend. I know that you want to kill me also. Because of your determination, I must kill you by tearing you to pieces with my club. Krishna, although you are my relative, you are foolish. You are our greatest enemy. So I must kill you today, just as a person removes a boil in his body by a surgical operation. I am always very much obliged to my friends, and I therefore consider myself indebted to my dear friend Salva. I can liquidate my indebtedness to him only by killing you. As the caretaker of an elephant tries to control the animal by striking it with his trident, Dandavakra tried to control Krishna simply by speaking strong words. After finishing his vituperation, he struck Krishna on the head with his club and made a roaring sound like a lion. But Krishna, although struck strongly by the club of Dandavakra, did not move even an inch, nor did he feel any pain. Taking his Kamotaki club and moving very skillfully, Krishna struck Dandavakra's chest so fiercely that Dandavakra's heart split in twain. As a result, Dandavakra began to vomit blood. His hair scattered and he fell to the ground, spreading his hands and legs. Within only a few minutes, all that remained of Dandavakra was a dead body on the ground. After the death of Dandavakra, just as at the time of Sisabala's death, in the presence of all the persons standing there, a small particle of spiritual effulgence came out of demon's body and very, very wonderfully merged into the body of Lord Krishna.
Dantavakra had a brother named Viduratha, who was overwhelmed with grief at Dantavakra's death. Out of grief and anger, Viduratha was breathing very heavily, and just to avenge the death of his brother, he appeared before Lord Krishna with a sword and a shield in his hands. He wanted to kill Krishna immediately. When Lord Krishna understood that Viduratha was looking for the opportunity to strike him with his sword, he employed his Sudarshana Chakra, his razor-sharp disc, and without delay cut off Viduratha's head with its helmet and earrings. In this way, after killing Shalva and destroying his wonderful airplane, and then killing Dantavakra and Viduratha, Lord Krishna at last entered his city Dwarka. It would not have been possible for anyone but Krishna to kill these great heroes, and therefore all the demigods from heaven and the human beings on the surface of the globe were glorifying him. Great sages and ascetics, the denizens of the Siddha and Gandharva planets, the denizens known as Vidyadharas, Vasuki, and the Mahanagas, the beautiful angels, the inhabitants of Pitriloka, the Yaksha, the Kinnaras, and the Chanaras all showered flowers upon him and sang songs of his victory in great jubilation. Decorating the entire city very festively, the citizens of Dwarka held a great celebration. And when Lord Krishna passed through the city, All the members of Vrishni dynasty and the heroes of the Yadu dynasty followed him with great respect. These are some of the transcendental pastimes of Lord Krishna, the master of all mystic power and the lord of all cosmic manifestations. Those who are fools, who are like animals, sometimes think that Krishna is defeated. But factually, he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and no one can defeat him. He always remains victorious over everyone. He alone is God, and all others are his subservient order carriers.
Once upon a time, Lord Balaram heard that an arrangement was being made for a fight between the two rival parties in the Kuru dynasty. One headed by Duryodhana and the other by the Pandavas. He did not like the idea and he tried to act as a mediator to stop the fighting. Finding it impossible and not wishing to take an active part on behalf of either party, he left Dwaraka on the play of visiting various holy places of pilgrimage. He first of all visited the place of pilgrimage known as Prabhas Kshetra. He took his bath there and he pacified the local brahmanas and offered oblations to the demigods, pittas, great sages, and people in general. In accordance with Vedic ritualistic ceremonies, that is the Vedic method of visiting holy places. After this, accompanied by some respectable brahmanas, he decided to visit different places on the bank of the river Saraswati. He gradually visited such places as Prithudak, Bindusar, Tritakupa, Sudarshan Tirtha, Vishal Tirtha, Brahma Tirtha and Chakra Tirtha. Besides these, he also visited all the holy places on the bank of the Saraswati river running toward the east. After this, he visited all the principal holy places on the bank of the Yamuna and the bank of the Ganges. Thus, he gradually came to the holy places known as Naimesharanya.
Naimesharanya is still existing in India, and in ancient times it was especially used for the meeting of great sages and saintly persons with the aim of understanding spiritual life and self-realization. When Lord Balram visited that place, there was a great sacrifice being performed by a great assembly of transcendentalists. Such meetings were planned to last thousands of years. When Lord Balram arrived, all the participants in the meeting, great sages, SSTs, brahmanas and learned scholars immediately arose from their seats and welcomed him with great honor and respect. Some offered him respects by standing up and then paying obeisances, and those who were elderly, great sages and brahmanas offered him blessings after great sages and brahmana offered him blessings after standing up. After this formality, Lord Balram was offered a suitable seat and everyone present worshipped him. Everyone in the assembly stood up in the presence of Balram. Hare Krishna. Because they knew him to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Education or learning means to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, although Lord Balram appeared on the earth as a Kshatriya, all the Brahmanas and sages stood up because they knew who Lord Balram was.
Unfortunately, after being worshipped and seated in his place, Lord Balaram saw Romisharan, the disciple of Vyasadeva, the liberal incarnation of Godhead, still sitting on Vyasasana. He had neither gotten up from his seat nor offered him respect, because he was seated on the Vyasasana. He foolishly thought himself greater than the Lord. Therefore, he did not get down from his seat or bow down before the Lord. Lord Balaram then just considered the history of the Romish Sharana. He was born in a Suta family or mixed family, born of a Brahmana woman and Kshatriya man. Therefore, although Romisharan considered Balaram as Kshatriya, he should not have remained sitting on the highest seat. According to his position by birth, he should not even have expected the highest seat position, because many learned Brahmanas and sages were present. Lord Balaram also observed that Romisharan not only refused to come down from his excellent seat, but did not even stand up and offer his respect when Balaram ji entered the assembly. Lord Balaram did not like the audience of the Romisharan, and becoming very angry at him, declared from his seat, "This man Romisharan is so impure that he has accepted a higher seat than that of all the respectable Brahmanas present here, although he was born in a degraded Pritopola family."
When a person is seated on the Vyasasana, he does not generally have to stand to receive a particular person entering the assembly. But in this case, the situation was different because Lord Baladeva is not an ordinary human being. Therefore, although Roma Harshana Sutta was voted to the Vyasasana by all the Brahmanas, he should have followed the behavior of other learned sages and Brahmanas present, and should have known that Lord Balarama is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Respects are always due him, even though such respects can be avoided in the case of an ordinary man. The appearance of Krishna and Balarama is especially meant for re-establishment of the religious principles. As stated in the Bhagavad-Gita, the highest religious principle is to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srimad Bhagavatam also confirms that the topmost perfection of religion is to be engaged in the devotional service of the Lord.
When Lord Balarama saw that Romakarshana Sutta did not understand the highest principle of religion, in spite of his having studied all the Vedas, he certainly could not support his position. Romakarshana Sutta had been given the chance to become a perfect Brahmana, but because of his ill behavior in his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his low birth was immediately remembered. Romakarshana Sutta had been given the position of a Brahmana, but he had not been born in the family of a Brahmana. He had been born in the Pratiloma family. According to the Vedic concept, there are two kinds of mixed family heritage called Anuloma and Pratiloma. When a male is united with a female of a lower caste, the offspring is Anuloma. But a male unites with the woman of a higher caste, the offspring is called Pratiloma. Romakarshana Sutta belonged to a Pratiloma family because his father was a Kshatriya and his mother was a Brahmana. Because Romakarshana's transcendental realization was not perfect, Lord Balarama remembered his Pratiloma heritage. The idea is that any man may be given the chance to become a Brahmana, but if he improperly uses the position of a Brahmana without actual realization, then his elevation to the Brahmanical position is not valid.
Finish the chapter. Right? You proved after seeing this. After seeing the deficiency of realization In Romaharshana Sutta, Lord Balarama decided to chastise him for being puffed up. Lord Balarama therefore said, "This man is liable to be awarded the death punishment because although he has a good qualification of being a disciple of Lord Vyasadeva, and although he has studied all the Vedic literature from his exalted personality, he was not submissive in the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated in the Bhagavad-Gita, a person who is actually a Brahmana and is very learned must automatically become very gentle also. But although Romaharshana Sutta was very learned and had been given the chance to become a Brahmana, he had not become gentle. From this, we can understand that one who is puffed up by material acquisitions cannot acquire the gentle behavior befitting a Brahmana. The learning of such a person is as good as a valuable jewel decorating the hood of a serpent. Despite the valuable jewel on the hood, a serpent is still a serpent and is as fearful as an ordinary serpent. If a person does not become meek and humble, all of his studies of the Vedas and Puranas and his vast knowledge of the Shastras are simply outward dress, like the costume of a theatrical artist dancing on the stage. Lord Balarama considered, "I have appeared in order to chastise false persons who are internally impure but externally pose themselves as very learned and religious. My killing of such persons is proper to check them from further sinful activity."
Lord Balaram had avoided taking part in the battle of Kurukshetra, and yet, because of his position as an incarnation, the establishment of religious principles was his prime duty. Considering these points, he killed Romaharshana Sutta simply by sticking with him a kusa straw, which was nothing but a blade of grass. If someone questions how Lord Balaram could kill Romaharshana Sutta simply by striking him with a blade of kusa grass, the answer is given in Srimad Bhagavatam by the use of word Prabhu, Master. The Lord's position is always transcendental, and because He is omnipotent, He can act as He likes, without being obliged to follow the material laws and principles. Thus, it was possible for Him to kill Romaharshana Sutta simply by striking him with a blade of kusa grass. At the death of Romaharshana Sutta, everyone present became most aggrieved and cried out, "Alas, alas!" Although all the Brahmanas and sages present knew Lord Balaram to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they did not hesitate to protest the Lord's action. They humbly submitted, "Our dear Lord, we think that your action is not in line with the religious principles. Dear Lord Jadunandan, we may inform you that we Brahmanas posted Romaharshana Sutta and that exalted position for the duration of the great sacrifice. He was seated on the Vyasasana by our election, and when one is seated on the Vyasasana, it is improper for him to stand up to receive a person. Moreover, we awarded Romaharshana Sutta and undisturbed duration of life under the circumstances, since your lordship has killed him without knowing all these facts. We think that your action is equal to killing a Brahmana. Dear Lord, deliverer of all fallen souls, we know for certain that you are the knower of all Vedic principles. You are the master of all mystic powers. Therefore, the Vedic injunctions cannot ordinarily be applied to you. But we respectfully advise you to show your causeless mercy upon others by kindly atoning for this killing of Romaharshana Sutta. We do not, however, suggest that kind of act you should perform to atone for killing him. We simply suggest that you adopt some method of atonement so that others may follow your action. What is done by a great personality is followed by the ordinary man."
The Lord replied, Yes, I must atone for this action, which may have been proper for me, but is improper for others. Therefore, I think it is my duty to execute a suitable act of atonement enjoined in the authoritative scriptures. Simultaneously, I can also give the Romisharan Sutta life again with a span of a long duration, sufficient strength and full power of the senses. Not only this, but if one desire, I shall be glad to award him anything else you may ask. I shall be very glad to grant all these boons to fulfill your desire. This statement by Lord Balram definitely confirms that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is free to act in any way. Although his killing of Romisharan Sutta may be considered improper, he could immediately contract it with the great profit to all. Therefore, one should not imitate the action of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should simply follow the instruction of the Lord. All the great learned sages present realized that although they considered the action of the Lord Balram improper, the Lord was immediately able to compensate with the greatest profit. Now, wanting to detract from the mission of the Lord in killing Romisharan Sutta, all of them prayed, Our dear Lord, the uncommon use of your Kusa weapon to kill Romisharan Sutta may remain as it is. Because you desire to kill him, he should not be brought to the life again. At the same time, your Lordship, many members thus that we sages and the Brahmanas voluntarily gave him long life. Therefore, such a benediction should not be nullified. Thus, the request of all the learned Brahmana in the assembly was ambiguous because they wanted to keep intact their benediction that Romisharan Sutta would continue to live until the end of the great sacrifice. But at the same time, they did not want to nullify Balram's killing him.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead therefore solved the problem in a manner befitting his exalted position. He said, Because the Son is produced from the body of the Father, the Vedas enjoin that the Son is the Father's representative. Therefore, I say that Ugrasrava Sutta, the son of Romaharshana Sutta, should henceforth take his father's position and continue the discourses on the Puranas, and because you wanted Romaharshana to have a long duration of life, this benediction will be transferred to his son. The son, Ugrasrava, will therefore have all the facilities you offered, a long duration of life in a good and healthy body, with no disturbances and full strength of all the senses. Lord Balarama then implored all the sages and Brahmanas that aside from the benediction offered to the son of Romaharshana, they should ask from him any other benediction, and he would be prepared to fulfill it immediately. The Lord thus placed himself in the position of an ordinary Kshatriya and informed the sages that he did not know in what way he could atone for his killing of Romaharshana, but whatever they would suggest, he would be glad to accept.
The Brahmanas could understand the purpose of the Lord, and thus they suggested that he atone in a manner beneficial to them. They said, Our dear Lord, there is very powerful demon of the name Balwala. He is the son of Ilvala, and he visits this sacred place of sacrifice every fortnight on the full moon and the moonless days, and creates a great disturbances to the discharge of the duties in the sacrifice. O descendant of the Dasana family, the Sarkha family, we all request you to kill the demon. We think that if you kindly kill him, that will be your atonement on our behalf. The demon occasionally comes here and profusely throws upon us contaminated, impure things like pus, blood, stool, urine, and wine. He pollutes the sacred place by showering such filth upon us. After killing Balwala, you may continue touring all the sacred places and pilgrimage for 12 months, and in that way you will be completely freed from all contamination. That is our prescription. Thus ends the Bhakti-Vedanta purport of the 78th chapter of Krishna, the killing of Dandavakra, Vidurada, and Romakrsna.
Okay. Hare Krishna. So thank you, devotees, and this is how we conclude our weekly Sunday Krishna book reading to Srila Prabhupada, and let us offer our respectful obeisances to him. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti-Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatare, and all to us others. Vancha kalpataruvyaschа kripa sindhuvya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Krishna book reading ki jai.